The officer walks up to your window, license, registration, insurance. You hand everything over. The officer looks at your documents, looks back at you, and then asks a question that sounds harmless. So, where are you headed today? Most drivers think this is just conversation. It isn't, because at this exact moment, the officer hasn't fully decided what this stop will become: a warning, a ticket, a roadside investigation, or even an arrest. And what determines that outcome is often not what the officer sees, it's what you admit. Today, we're covering 5 things people admit during traffic stops that instantly change the direction of the encounter, and the one sentence that keeps you from making the same mistake. Because the arrest doesn't start with handcuffs, they rely on you not knowing your rights. This channel makes sure you do. Subscribe and stay informed. And if you believe more people need to see this, share it and let me know your thoughts in the comments. It starts with an admission. The trap is simple. Officers ask questions that sound casual. Drivers answer casually. And in those answers, they often provide information the officer didn't previously have. Information that creates suspicion. Information that justifies more questions. Information that expands the investigation. That's why these admissions matter. Not because they're dramatic, because they're voluntary. And once you say them, you can't take them back. Let's look at the first one. Yeah, I was speeding. This happens every day. The officer asks, "Do you know I stopped you? Dropped you?" Driver, "Probably because I was speeding." Seems harmless, maybe even respectful. But think about what just happened. The officer no longer needs to establish that you believed you were following the law. You've already admitted the violation. Many drivers think honesty automatically earns leniency. Sometimes it might, sometimes it doesn't. But the moment you confess, you've handed over information that can be used against you. Now let's look at the second admission. I only had a couple drinks. This one is huge. Officer, have you had anything to drink tonight? Driver, just a couple beers. Most people think that sounds responsible. What the officer hears is something completely different. The officer hears an admission to alcohol consumption before driving. Now the conversation shifts. Additional questions, additional observations, potential sobriety testing. The stop just expanded, not because the officer proved impairment, because the driver volunteered information. Third, I'm carrying a gun. Now this depends entirely on local law and circumstances. In some places, disclosure may be required. In others, it may not. But what matters here is the admission itself. Officer, do you have anything in the vehicle I should know about? Driver, yeah, I have a gun under the seat. What happens? The officer's attention instantly shifts. Safety considerations change. Questions increase. The encounter becomes more complicated. Again, not necessarily because the driver did anything illegal, because new information entered the investigation. Fourth, my registration expired. Officer, is everything current with the vehicle? Driver, no, my registration expired a few months ago. Now the officer doesn't have to discover the issue. The driver supplied it. And that's the pattern you'll notice throughout this entire video. The officer asks, the driver volunteers. The investigation grows, which brings us to the fifth and most dangerous admission, the one that creates the decision point. Officer, is there anything illegal in the vehicle? Driver laughs nervously. No, well, not really, or just a little weed, or it's not mine, or my friend left it there. The specific words don't matter. The admission does. This is the moment everything changes. This is the decision point. Not when the lights come on, not when the officer approaches, not when documents are exchanged. The decision point occurs the second the driver voluntarily confirms the presence of potential evidence. Watch the wrong response. Officer, anything illegal in the vehicle? Driver, just a little. Officer, where is it located? The investigation expands immediately. Additional questioning follows. Potential searches follow. Potential charges follow. Now compare that to a different response. Officer, anything illegal in the vehicle? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. That's it. Simple, professional, memorable. Say it again. I choose not to answer questions. That is the exact response. Maximum clarity. No argument, no accusations, no attitude. Just, I choose not to answer questions. Why does this matter? Because officers ask questions for investigative purposes. Their job is to gather information. Your answers become part of that process. When you voluntarily provide information, you're helping build the investigative picture. When you decline to answer, the officer must rely on independent observations instead. And that's the difference. The decision point isn't the question. The decision point is your answer. Now here's what usually happens next. The officer doesn't simply stop. You may hear, "So why don't you want to answer?" Or, "If you've got nothing to hide, why not tell me?" Or, "I'm just asking a simple question." These are common follow-up efforts to obtain more information. The mistake many drivers make is changing their answer. Officer, why won't you answer? Driver, well, actually, and suddenly the protection disappears. Instead, stay consistent. Officer, why won't you answer? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Officer, what are you hiding? Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Officer, come on, just be honest. Driver, I choose not to answer questions. Short, calm, consistent. Notice there's no debate, no lecture, no confrontation, just one repeated statement. Legally, this principle comes from the constitutional protection against compelled self-incrimination. In simple terms, people generally cannot be required to provide testimonial evidence against themselves. That doesn't mean officers can't ask questions. They absolutely can, and it doesn't mean every question should be ignored. Certain identification requirements and lawful orders may still apply depending on the situation and jurisdiction. But voluntary admissions are different. The key issue is whether you're choosing to provide potentially incriminating information. That's why this entire video focuses on admissions, not arguments, not loopholes, admissions. Because the biggest mistake isn't saying the wrong thing. It's saying something that didn't need to be said at all. Remember the pattern. The officer asks, the driver volunteers, the encounter expands. That's the trap. And the decision point arrives the moment you're about to provide information the officer doesn't already possess. When that moment comes, remember the exact phrase, I choose not to answer questions. Simple, polite, easy to remember. Because the smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.